My name is John Stewart. I'm president of the Florida Bar, and we are fortunate enough to be joined with Justice Carlos Muñiz of the Florida Supreme Court, who is kind enough to participate in this video interview with us to show during our first ever Florida Bar annual virtual convention. So first of all, Justice Muñiz, let me just thank you very much for taking the time to join us for a few minutes today.
No, thank you, John. I appreciate it.
So when we were getting ready for this interview, I was going to say that you were the newest member of the court, but we can't say that anymore. But you're fairly new on the court still, I think about a year and a half. And so I think our members would really be interested in knowing, what's it like sort of to have a typical day in the life of a Florida Supreme Court justice? And I would just add on to that, was it what you expected?
Yeah, well, I'm really very blessed to have this job. It's been a great year and a half. I love my colleagues on the court, and I'm really excited about the two new colleagues who are going to be joining us. John Coryell already started, and he participated in OAs this week, and I'm looking forward to Justice Francis joining later this year. As I expected, it's a fairly solitary job. I mean, it's a lot of reading and writing and preparing for our OAs. I think because of the virus and everything, the public facing aspects of the job have obviously decreased. We're doing online tours with schools here at the court, and so I've been able to address some groups that way, which has been fun, and our staff here has been doing a great job with that, trying to adjust to everything. But it's been like I said, it's been a great year, and really there's nothing I could say about the job so far other than that it's lived up to all my best expectations. The people here at the court, it really is kind of a family. We've got just a great team with Oscar and the Marshall staff and our public affairs staff, and each of the justices' own teams, and really kind of getting to know a lot of the Florida Bar family. I mean, getting to know you has been great. Josh Doyle's fantastic. The Florida Historical Society, really all the people who we interact with, who are concerned about the legal profession and the court system in our state and the Supreme Court as an institution. It's been a great opportunity this year to get to meet and work with everyone.
Well, I know you mentioned the pandemic and how you were doing virtual school tours. I didn't know that, but that's really fantastic. And I know that you all had your first virtual, or I guess remote, oral arguments. How did you feel about that? I mean, was it sort of, I know it had to be a different look and feel, but did you like it? Do you prefer to go back to live versions, or how do you feel?
It'll be nice when we can get back to live, but really it's been fairly seamless. The technology has been great. I think it's doing it through video with Zoom, I think, is a lot easier than it would be if we were just on a conference call type format, because obviously you can see people's body language and ask your questions at the right time. You lose a little bit as far as there's a certain kind of interaction with your colleagues, kind of an unspoken interaction that goes on when you're there in person. But the advocates have all been great. I've noticed that one thing that seems a little different to me is, I don't know if it's unconscious or not, but I think I've noticed that the advocates themselves, when they're not the ones doing the presentation, that I'm at least much more aware of all of their sort of facial expressions and nodding and grimacing or shaking their head. Obviously, everything completely appropriate and everything. And it might be the same when you're in person, but you're just not as aware of it as you are when each person has their little box on the screen and everything. But as far as the substance of it, it really has been, I would say pretty much the same as an in-person oral argument.
Well, it's interesting to me. We had a chance to talk to Justice Polston already and asked him the same question, and he highlighted a lot of the same things you did about kind of noticing the advocates a little bit more. And he said, he also knew when his colleagues were going to speak or have a question, because they would take themselves off mute. So he was ready for something. So I think it's interesting how that, it's a little bit different dynamic, but I think for a lot of reasons, and not just in the context of oral arguments, we're going to be happy to get back to some live interaction in a lot of ways. You also mentioned that the court is a family, which is, it's a wonderful experience when that's also your work. And I know that you have publicly spoken about Chief Justice Kennedy being a fantastic mentor of yours. And, we talk a lot about mentorship in the legal profession, how hard it is when you have 108,000 lawyers, so many young lawyers coming out. I'd love for you to sort of weigh in on your thoughts on the value of mentorship, and maybe whether it's personal to you or just in general in terms of helping young lawyers succeed in our profession.
No, I mean, it's been hugely important for me. What you're alluding to is, I talk a lot about Chief Justice Kennedy and his role in my, moving to Florida in the first place 20 years ago and having the opportunity to work with him. And he's just one of the many just really outstanding people who I've been able to learn from throughout my career, not just in terms of the substance of the law, but just how to conduct yourself and how to be an ethical person and how to be a good colleague and everything. I think sort of it's having kind of conscious sort of mentor relationships, I think is really important, and can be very beneficial, especially, in a career like, the law, where so much of what we do involves judgment. Obviously there's a lot of, specialization, and there's kind of a never ending need to kind of keep educating yourself more and learning more. But, there's a lot of the way we do our jobs that you can only learn through doing it and through watching people who've done it before you and seeing what works and what doesn't work and kind of fitting it to yourself. And I also think, it's important both sort of as a mentor and as a mentee to be aware of how, all of your interactions with people are opportunities to learn. I mean, I think a lot about my own life and things that have affected me. I mean, just individual conversations with people that stick with you. I mean, I love writing. I take the, writing really seriously. And there, I can think of one specific conversation that I had with one of my bosses, going through something that we were working on and some advice that he gave me that, that I think about almost every time that I write something now. And, he wasn't thinking at the time, oh, I'm, mentoring Carlos, and I wasn't thinking consciously, oh, I'm being mentored. But, that's just an example of how, every interaction that you have, you don't know, hopefully in a good way, but it could be in a bad way, how you can really affect, how people view you and their jobs, and how it can really stick with them and everything. So, I just think it's something that, if people can have opportunities to kind of consciously, decide to mentor others, but really just being conscious of it in terms of understanding how, everything that you do can really have that kind of an effect on people.
Well, I think it's great advice, particularly for our young lawyers. There's not always that formal mentor-mentee relationship, but to be looking for those kernels of wisdom as they come to you and taking advantage of them, I think is fantastic advice. So we never surprise our Florida Supreme Court with anything. So the question that's coming, which is something. What would be something about you that the members might not generally know or expect from Justice Carlos Muñiz?
I was thinking, it was kind of one of the sort of running joke themes at my investiture with Robert Luck was how boring I am. So I was sort of trying to think of something that people might find interesting. And I think if you want to learn something about me that would be a surprise, you probably have to ask Josh Doyle, because in our former lives, when I was going through the process for my job at the Department of Education up in DC, and he was still working for the FBI, he actually did my background investigation. So, fast forward a couple of years, I think we were both probably pretty surprised to find ourselves in our new roles. So that's, a little tidbit about my background. And if he probably knows things about me that I don't even know. I don't know if any of it would be funny or interesting, but he's probably the person to ask.
Well, I can tell you that your secret is safe with Josh Doyle, because I've asked him for a lot of his FBI secrets and he's refused to share any. So So it will stay safe with him. You know, I want to thank you for really for all that you do for the Florida members, for the Florida bar. And, you know, if you have any closing remarks, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up, but we really appreciate your time and participating. This is a unique time, a challenging time. We've transitioned to the virtual convention. You know, the live annual convention is a nice opportunity for people to catch up that maybe only catch up once a year. So it means a lot that you take the time to do this for us, and we appreciate you. We know your schedule is challenging, but if you have anything you'd like to say before we wrap up, you get the last word.
No, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your interest in having this conversation with me. Obviously, anyone who takes the time to watch this, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that we're not going to see each other in person this summer. You know, I had a great experience last year, and in fact, John, your speech by Mayanne introducing you, Mayanne Downs, was one of the highlights for me. And I kept thinking I need to figure out a way to get Mayanne to speak at my investiture, and I couldn't do it. So, you know, we were stuck with Tim Serio. But, you know, it was a great event last year. And, you know, it's nice of you to thank me for doing this, but I want to thank you and the rest of the folks at the bar for everything that you guys do to help the court. I'm really excited about your initiative on you know taking a broad look at the regulation of the profession and how we can improve that. And I know that that's something that's going to extend beyond your tenure, and you know I expect great things to come out of that, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I just want to thank you and your team for everything that you do.
Well, thank you, Justice Carlos Muñiz of the Florida Supreme Court, for joining us. Stay safe, and look forward to the opportunity of being able to see you face to face again before too long.
Thank you. I appreciate it.